The glass wall shattered, not from impact, but from the silence that followed his words. You have no idea how many times I've imagined this. The sentence hung in the air, trembling, unfinished, dangerous. His voice wasn't loud, but it cracked in a way that made it echo louder than any scream. The office lights above flickered slightly, or maybe it was just his vision blurring from the weight of what he had just done. Across the desk, she didn't move. She didn't blink. She just stared at him, as if the ground beneath both of them had suddenly disappeared. Before we go further, if you believe every story hides a lesson, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Humanity Stories. You never know which story might stay with you. He stood there in a wrinkled white shirt, sleeves rolled unevenly, tie loosened like it had been strangling him all day. A 36-year-old man who looked older than he was, not because of age, but because of exhaustion that had settled into his bones. There were faint dark circles under his eyes, the kind that don't go away with sleep, because sleep itself had become a luxury long ago. His hands were trembling, but he didn't hide them. For once, he wasn't trying to look composed. This wasn't part of the plan. There had never been a plan for this. It had started months ago, quietly, invisibly. Just another late night at the office. He had stayed back to finish reports, the kind no one notices unless they're done wrong. Everyone had left hours ago, the building hollow and humming with artificial light. And then she walked out of her office. She had always been distant, precise, untouchable. A woman in her early 40s, always dressed in sharp, muted colors, charcoal suits, crisp blouses, heels that echoed authority with every step. Her hair always tied back, not a strand out of place. People didn't talk to her unless necessary. Not because she was cruel, but because she seemed unreachable, like someone living behind glass. That night, though, something was different. She wasn't carrying her usual confidence. Her shoulders were slightly lowered, her steps slower. She didn't notice him at first. She just stood by the window, staring out at the empty city like she was searching for something that wasn't there. And then she sighed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was real. And somehow, that small, human moment broke something inside him. Because he knew that sigh. He had heard it from himself. From his daughter. From the quiet corners of his own home after putting her to sleep and sitting alone in the dark, wondering how life had narrowed into survival. He hadn't meant to watch her. He hadn't meant to care. But from that night on, something shifted. He started noticing things, tiny cracks in her perfect exterior. The way she paused before answering difficult emails. The way she rubbed her temple when she thought no one was looking. The way her eyes lingered just a second too long on families passing by outside the office windows. And slowly, dangerously, he began to imagine. Not fantasies of romance, not at first. Just moments, conversations. A world where they were both just people, not roles. A place where he wasn't just a struggling single father trying to hold everything together, and she wasn't just the unreachable boss everyone feared. He imagined telling her about his daughter, the way she refused to sleep without a bedtime story, the way she asked questions about her mother he didn't always know how to answer. He imagined her listening, not as a boss, but as someone who understood silence. And then the imagination grew. It became something he couldn't control. Not because it was inappropriate, but because it felt too real, too needed. And that scared him, so he buried it, for months, until tonight, when she had called him into her office after hours. The city outside was dark again, just like that first night. Only this time, she wasn't standing by the window. She was sitting behind her desk, looking at him with a seriousness that felt different. She had found out. Not about his feelings, but about his life. A file left open, emergency contact details, a note about his daughter's school. The kind of information that turns a reliable employee into a human being. And she had asked him why he never mentioned it. Why he never asked for help. Why he carried everything alone. Something inside him snapped. Because the truth was, he didn't know how not to. Because every time he thought about asking for help, he remembered the nights he sat beside his daughter's bed, promising her everything would be okay, even when he wasn't sure himself. Because somewhere along the way, he had convinced himself that needing someone was a weakness he couldn't afford. And then she kept looking at him. Not like a boss. Not like someone judging him. But like someone, waiting. And that's when the words came out. Unplanned. Unfiltered. You have no idea how many times I've imagined this. The silence after that was unbearable. He wanted to take it back. To rewind time. To replace it with something safe, something professional. But it was too late. The truth was out, raw and exposed. His chest tightened as he waited for the consequences. A warning. A dismissal. Distance. Anything. But she didn't react the way he expected. She didn't get angry. She didn't look offended. Instead, something in her expression softened in a way he had never seen before. The sharp edges disappeared. The distance faded. And for the first time, she looked tired. Human. She stood up slowly, walking around the desk, her heels quieter now, almost hesitant. When she stopped in front of him, there was no authority in her posture. Just presence. And then she spoke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But with a quiet honesty that felt heavier than anything else. She told him he wasn't the only one who imagined things he shouldn't. That sometimes, loneliness makes you build entire worlds in your head, because reality feels too small, too empty. That she had seen him too. Not just as an employee. But as someone carrying more than he ever showed. The room felt smaller. Warmer. Fragile. Nothing about the moment was perfect. There were no grand declarations, no sudden solutions. Just two people standing in the quiet aftermath of honesty, unsure of what came next. And somehow, that made it real. Because life doesn't resolve itself in neat endings. Sometimes